أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you for joining us once again in the series in which we are trying to explore and study and understand the types of knowledge that our religion instructs us to learn. Before I go any further for today, just to keep in mind, we have a tighter schedule than usual. We have a little bit less time than usual, and inshallah we can wrap up the topic in the time that we have. So bear with us if we have to go a little bit faster than usual. So on the agenda for today, inshallah, the last time that we met, we started to introduce this category of knowledge we call religious knowledge. And we only gave a couple of high-level introductory remarks related to religious knowledge. Inshallah, today we continue building on those. And we focused mainly the last time on how in our religion in general, for anything that we contemplate, anything that we think about, there are only 5 categories in which our practical position can fall into. Practical meaning the action that derives out of that situation. When we are to do something or not to do something, it can only fall into one of 5 categories, namely that it is obligatory or recommended or discouraged or forbidden or what we called neutral. When we looked at those categories and we applied them to knowledge, we saw that those same categories apply to the types of knowledge that we can learn. And so this is something that we're going to have to keep in mind as we go further down in the series. So that every time we talk about a type of knowledge, we should be able to say, is this type of knowledge obligatory, recommended, discouraged, forbidden, or neutral? And we spend time talking about each one of these categories. We don't want to repeat. And today, inshallah, we want to continue with a few more points. All of these fall under the general introduction to religious knowledge. One of the points has to do with how basically in our religion, every type of knowledge, even those that are not religious, and inshallah, soon in the series, we're going to start seeing types of knowledge that are not religious. We're going to see our religion recommend that we learn types of knowledge that none of us would consider to be religious knowledge. Even those, there is a religious dimension to them. So today, inshallah, we're simply establishing with a couple of hadith, and there will be a lot more specificity, a lot more clear examples as we go into the specific types of knowledge, inshallah, later, how everything is intertwined between the non-religious and the religious. Which brings us to the next topic about the new trends, as we can call them, in Islamic scholarship. We said that we could maybe try to touch on the topic last time we met. We ran out of time. So inshallah, today we talk about this. And then as part of our general introduction, we want to start moving towards understanding how knowledge can be what we called foundational. In that anything that we think about in life in general and how we experience reality is always experienced from a point of view. Religious knowledge falls in that type of category. Meaning that religion allows me to experience reality with a specific meaning. I understand who I am in that reality. I understand everything has a place and my relationship to that thing. And inshallah, that will become a little bit clearer. And if we can make it, we will finally reach the point where we start talking about specific types of religious knowledge today, starting with beliefs. 1 or 2 minutes quickly for a recap of what we have said until now. We have said that our religion says there is an overabundance of knowledge. There is too much knowledge to learn. And therefore, we must prioritize. We cannot simply say that our religion says knowledge is good, the acquisition of knowledge is good, therefore go and constantly be learning everything. No. You have to prioritize what you learn. You have to be selective based on certain criteria. Mainly, what you learn has to be beneficial and has to be fixing you. Those are the two main areas. Beneficial meaning it may be generally beneficial. Everybody agrees that there are certain things that are very beneficial to learn for everyone. Great, that's generally beneficial. Or beneficial specifically to you because of your situation, because of your needs, then this type of knowledge becomes beneficial to you. And beyond that, we saw that our religion says to prioritize the things that ma aslahak, that which is going to be a remedy and a cure and a fix for you specifically. So this is not because it's simply beneficial, it's that there is something broken that needs fixing. Go learn that specific type of knowledge, which means you have to first do an assessment and understand what is it that is broken and that needs fixing, and then what's the type of knowledge that we need to acquire for that. Last time we met, we spoke about the next point, so I won't spend too much time on it. The idea that there are types of knowledge our religion says are necessary. They are necessary because they allow us to discharge ourselves of our duties, of our responsibilities. In other words, you would not be able to act upon your duties if you do not know that type of knowledge. So it becomes necessary. It becomes wajib. And as we said, when we went through the details last time we met, if something is a condition for something else, and that something else is obligatory, then the condition also becomes obligatory. You must also acquire it in order to be able to do that thing that is obligatory, even though the condition in itself is not obligatory. So in order to free myself of a duty, of a responsibility, of something that is incumbent upon me, which is in itself obligatory, I may have to go learn types of knowledge that allow me to do that properly, to do that fully. And we gave examples of this. We saw how in our religion it instructs us that as we acquire knowledge, it should help us become more autonomous. It should help us think for ourselves. It should help us be able to act for ourselves, not constantly having to go back and rely on some external source. Because you have the knowledge yourself. You're confident. You know what you're supposed to be doing, how you're supposed to be doing it. And we said this applies at the level of the individual. Great. Easy enough, simple enough. This also applies at the level of a community, at the level of a society. That a society should be able to equip itself with knowledge so that it becomes self-sufficient, so that it becomes autonomous, that you are not constantly dependent on another for everything that you do. If you have someone who is a lawyer within your family, you can rely on them for your legal needs. If you have someone who's a medical doctor, you can rely on them for your medical needs. Someone who's a financial expert, someone who's a car mechanic, someone who is an electrician, someone who is, and so on and so forth. So at the level of a community can organize itself in that manner, so that you become, as a community, self-sufficient. And this will not happen by itself on its own randomly. This needs strategizing. This needs thinking and planning and prioritizing so that things fall in place the way they're supposed to be. The general effect of the knowledge is much more important than the type of knowledge. This again and again came through in the hadith. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam are telling us it matters much more that that knowledge is going to have an effect on you, to transform you. We look at the effect of the knowledge before we look at what type of knowledge it is. The type of knowledge is secondary. We'll get to it, but we have to start with, how is it going to affect you? Is it going to transform you? Is it going to help you? Is it going to harm you? Before I look at the type of information that it is, I have to look at the effect of that knowledge. We spoke about how in the hadith there is a need in our religion, especially as followers of Ahlul Bayt. We are expected to have depth, to not accept something that is superficial. To say, I have learned, you have to go to the bottom of it. Go further than accepting the superficial understanding. And this applies in general to everything. Go for what is genuine and real and deep, and don't accept a checkmark exercise. I've done it, I've learned it, and I move on. So depth is important. Experience is knowledge. And experiential knowledge is very valuable. We saw a number of hadith talking about the importance of experience. That it is not enough to learn information that is just theory, like I'm doing here. If you are learning anything from what I'm saying, this is theory. You're not actually going through the experience of the matters we are talking about. If you do, that would be called experiential knowledge. You're acquiring knowledge through experience, not through theoretical notions and speech and so on and so forth. And we saw that this goes beyond the person. Sometimes you're also learning from the experience of others. This is extremely important, especially in our communities. And then, finally, as we said, we studied the 5 categories of action in Islam and how they apply to the types of knowledge. And in this case, we saw that therefore some knowledge will become obligatory, encouraged, discouraged, forbidden, or neutral. Based on a couple of remarks that I received this week, I just wanted to add maybe a quick note before I go further in the religious knowledge. We spent a lot of time last week going through the 5 categories. And we did 2 things when we went through the categories. The first is we explained what those categories are in general. And this, to be honest with you, I often do this, but I don't label it so that it runs more smoothly and it's accepted and it goes through. Sometimes the lessons, we don't call them that, but sometimes the lessons are or become or are a part of history. Sometimes the lessons turn into akhlaq and ethics and spirituality. Sometimes the lessons turn into tafsir and Quranic sciences. That specific lesson would be a lesson that you learn from fiqh, from Islamic law. It's an Islamic law that you would study that there are 5 categories of actions to see what is called al-hukm. What are the types of hukm in Islam, and so on and so forth. And so we tried to do 2 things. One, we understood what the 5 categories are with examples, with definitions, and so on and so forth. Secondly, we applied all of this to knowledge. And then we looked at what this means for an individual and what this means for a community. For each one of the types of knowledge and each one of the categories that we talked about, we presented types of knowledge that would be for the individual, obligatory, recommended, discouraged, forbidden, and neutral. And we said there are also similar examples that we can come up with for a community. This is no longer about the individual. Why do I mention this? I mention this because sometimes these types of settings are presented, and this is very unfortunate, whether it is about this one or in general, when religion is taught, it's presented as being for children or for the youth. There's an insistence on this point, that this is a program for the youth. This is a program for the younger people. Those who attend these types of lectures can assess for themselves whether this is for the youth or not. The way we present them is not meant to be only for the youth. We're presenting everything so that the youth benefit as much as possible, but the program is not really for the youth. When we talk about the responsibilities of a community, we're not expecting the 10 and 15-year-olds to rise to the occasion and to show leadership. We're talking about the leaders of the community and explaining what their responsibilities are, strategically planning the future of a community. This has nothing to do with the youth, except to say that we're trying to make sure the youth are being put on the right track as early as possible. The earlier, the sooner you are exposed to this type of thinking, the sooner you are going to be sure that everything you do is feeding into the right direction. The same idea, this is the second point related to this, the same idea is sometimes presented to two people. The idea may seem simple enough, presented in the same exact way, but two people understand something completely different from it. One person will understand something straight to the point, literal, exactly as the words are said, and the other person will go very, very far in their understanding and interpretation of the few words that were said. It's the same idea. The difference in this case is in the recipient, in the audience, in your capacity to take and draw benefit from what is being said. And this is the strength and the weakness of presenting content that is concentrated, as we do here. Concentrated meaning that there is a lot that is packed in a very small place, in a very small time, in a very few words. The person who is able to analyze and synthesize is able to open from this a lot more content. We focus on what we refer to as keys. What are the keys? Keys that open a lot more doors. This is how we design these series. Otherwise, we would need 100 lectures instead of 10. And this is something, by the way, very clear. In the Holy Quran, it's the same thing. In the hadith, it's the same thing. Same hadith. One person reads it and says, oh, the hadith says this. And how much is there to understand from this hadith? There's 5 lines of explanation and you're done. And another scholar will take the hadith and write 2 volumes on that hadith, because they understand what this hadith is hinting to and reacting to and trying to correct. And this is something we see in Tafsir al-Quran, we see it in many other places. And this is something normal in life. If we were to take any example in life, we see that this is something that we all apply and we all live by and we all experience. Right now, there are notions, concepts that if we were to just mention the concept, each one of us would have a certain understanding of that concept. For some of us, it would be kind of straightforward, almost literal. And for some of us, it will go very, very far and in multiple disciplines. If I say, for instance, the notion of love, if I say the notion of justice, These can be very easily, simply understood, or they can become extremely nuanced and very deep. There is a religious dimension, there is a psychological dimension, there is a legal dimension, there is. And then there is all of your life experience. And the same thing applies to many of the notions that we find in these types of series and elsewhere in the Holy Quran. If I say the notion of amana, that you carry something like you've been entrusted with something. This notion of amana can be considered something very simple or can be something very deep. That your entire life has been given to you as an amana. And your experience of reality has been given to you as an amana. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to it this way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ. You were entrusted with something. Every other type of creature said, no, we will not carry this responsibility. What is this responsibility? Suddenly this notion of amana becomes a lot more serious and a lot more deep. The notion of pleasure. Generally speaking, everybody understands what we're talking about. But certainly, the 5 or 10-year-old is not going to have the same understanding of it as the 30 and the 50-year-old. And the same thing applies to the stories of the Quran. If you read the story of the Quran, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam and his story, or how his father sends his shirt at the end, that Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam sends his shirt to his father who had gone blind, and when he puts it on his face, he starts seeing again. You can just read that part and understand the literal meaning. Or you can go much deeper in your understanding of what is happening. You think about the complex, messy family dynamics that just happened in the story, even without anyone explaining that to you, if you have that life experience, if you have that angle. So this is to say, we're touching on a lot in this series, and I cannot always spend a lot of time on every point. I tend to say just enough that I think I allow people to now take that thought and keep going with it. And sometimes later in the series, we try to bring all the thoughts back into some punchlines and some themes. We can't always do that. Sometimes we do. So if you feel like there are things that need to be elaborated on, discussed more, detailed explicitly, say so. We will go into the details. If you think we're talking about something, we probably are, even though we're not saying all the words, because there is too much to say for the time that we're spending together. So if you're not sure, ask, poke, but you will see that the series is meant to be for everyone, and it is certainly not for one group over another. We have been giving a lot of importance to the theme and the idea of community building in everything we say. And there's a reason for that. Perhaps there is a gap. There's a very big need for us to start thinking in those terms in our lives, that our thinking goes beyond me as an individual to me as part of a greater community. I'll open a quick bracket and say very quickly, this is not part of what I'm thinking of saying, but very quickly, this is what is most needed for us believers and followers of the Imam of our time. That's why there is such an insistence on this, if it is not clear. Every time, every place, every set of circumstances has a specific need. It calls for certain things. This is where we're at in history, in society, in the circumstances we live in the world. There's an individual dimension, extremely important. You can't have a proper community without having the right individuals. But we are way past the point of only talking about individuals. If you've never worked on your individual aspect, work on both now. You don't have the luxury of only thinking about the individual anymore. We're way past that in our point in history. In any case, closing the bracket back up. Religious knowledge. So we already talked about the 5 categories and how they apply to religious knowledge. We want to now move to the idea that no matter what type of knowledge we look at in our religion, we are going to see that it is intertwined with the religious dimension. Even non-religious knowledge. It is often presented in a way that you will understand that it is part of a web. It is part of a network. That doesn't stand alone. If our religion says go study agriculture, you will see that it will link it somehow to religious knowledge. You cannot just talk about agricultural knowledge. If it says go study finance or economics, there is a religious dimension to it. If it says study history, there is a religious dimension to it. That's what gives it meaning. That's what makes it worth something. The value of it is that link. How it links ultimately to spirituality, how it links ultimately to its place in the bigger purposes of religion. So a first example here from Imam Ali alayhi salam. It's a longer hadith. I like the hadith a lot, so I took the whole hadith. Inshallah, you bear with me. This is kind of the first half of the hadith. Yeah, this is the second half. The first half. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, تعلموا العلم فإن تعلمه حسنة ومدارسته تسبيح والبحث عنه جهاد وتعليمه من لا يعلمه صدقة وبذله لأهله قربة. The Imam starts by saying, acquire knowledge. For learning it, acquiring it, is a good deed. The act of learning knowledge is a hasanah. Here you can interpret it in 2 ways. You can say that it is a hasanah equals you are getting thawab. You are getting a divine reward for learning knowledge. No different than when you stand to perform an act of worship. You are getting a reward, a divine reward, a hasanah. So knowledge acquires you, gives you hasanah. Or you can also say it is a good thing. Hasanah in general, outside of the religious context, is it is something good. Hasan is something that is good, something that is excellent. Studying it is tasbih. So now clearly we are in the spiritual and the religious dimension. To acquire knowledge, it is as though you are performing tasbih. You are saying, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Searching for it is striving in the path of God. This is a definition that Imam Ali alayhi salam is now giving of what jihad means. To acquire knowledge. Searching for it. Teaching it to those who do not have it is an act of charity. So charity is not just giving money. Sometimes you have to give your time, your effort, your energy, your knowledge. And giving it to those worthy of it is an act of closeness to God. In Arabic, it's وَبَذْلُهُ لِأَهْلِهِ. Knowledge has people that are deserving of it. Those are the people of knowledge. If you give it to them, those who are deserving of knowledge, you are performing an act that is a qurbah. An act to get closer to God. Every time we stand to pray, we tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm performing this act of prayer, qurbatan ilallah. All of my acts are supposed to be qurbah. An act to gain nearness to God. To get closer to God. Qurb. The Imam says, giving it to people who are worthy of it, this is an act of qurbah. An act of nearness to God. Okay, then the Imam continues. لِأَنَّهُ مَعَالِمَ الْحَلَالِ وَالْحَرَامِ. He's going to list benefits of knowledge. But at the same time, those benefits can become the types of knowledge we're learning. So the Imam, when he says, for knowledge is the signpost to what is lawful and unlawful. Knowledge is going to tell you, it's going to be a sign telling you, this is forbidden, this is not. This is obligatory, this is not. What type of knowledge is he talking about? Fiqh. This is Islamic law. This is what Islamic law studies. The Imam is talking about the benefit of it. But we know that the Imam is now talking about a specific type of knowledge. We've labeled it. We've categorized it and called it fiqh. The Imam continues, وَسَالِكٌ بِطَالِبِهِ سُبُلَ الْجَنَّةِ وَمُونِسٌ فِي الْوَحْدَةِ وَصَاحِبٌ فِي الْغُرْبَةِ وَدَلِيلٌ عَلَى السَّرَّاءِ وَسِلَاحٌ عَلَى الْأَعْدَاءِ وَزَيْنُ الْأَخِلَّاءِ. So the Imam here is listing a number of benefits to this true knowledge. It guides its seeker to the paths of paradise. So here we are certainly beyond just fiqh and Islamic law. Knowledge will get you to paradise. It'll show you the way to paradise. It is a companion in solitude. Now here we can understand this again as a very simple few words from the Imam, or we can say that this has a social context. The Imam can be talking to a society in this way. Do you feel isolated? Do you feel alone as a person or as a community? Knowledge is the remedy. Knowledge is the cure. He's going to continue. A friend in estrangement. It is a guide in prosperity, a weapon against enemies. We can take all of this and give a religious interpretation, or in all of these, we can give an entirely worldly interpretation. When the Imam says that it is through knowledge that you gain prosperity, prosperity can be entirely worldly. You live a good life. You live in comfort and luxury and safety using knowledge. This is worldly. There's no religious dimension in this. That it can be a weapon against your enemies can be entirely worldly. Or we can also add a religious dimension to this. An adornment among friends. And I added here myself, or an adornment of the friends. Because here friends can mean specifically the friends of God. This word can have both meanings. That this is something you recognize the friends of God with, that they have knowledge, or your friends. When we sit together as friends, as companions, this is a zayn. This is an adornment. It decorates us, it beautifies us, that we have knowledge. Or it is what beautifies those who are the friends of God. This ikhla. وَاتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ إِبْرَاهِيمَ خَلِيلًا. The translation of it would be, and God took Abraham as his friend. This is the adornment of the friends. Today we would say it's the saints, those who are close to God. Through knowledge, God elevates communities or societies or people. God elevates communities and places them at the forefront of goodness. As a community, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise you with the knowledge you have. Not as an individual, not because there are 2 or 3 or 5 people in this community who have knowledge. Allah subhanahu, Imam Ali alayhi salam here says, يرفع الله به أقواما يجعلهم في الخير أئمة يقتدى بهم. They become leaders, if I want to translate it literally, or if I want to translate it spiritually, they become imams. In a worldly way, they become leaders. These communities become the communities that lead. يَرْفَعُ اللَّهُ. God elevates communities with this knowledge and places them at the forefront of goodness. All that is good, they are ahead of everyone else in it. Because of that knowledge. And what else? making them leaders to be followed. Here the Imam says, تُرْمَقُ أَعْمَالُهُم. Turmaq is when you look up to something. Everybody else is looking up to you, to that community, to that society. Why? Because they are the leaders in knowledge. It can be religious and it can be worldly. Does it need to be religious? Isn't that the state of the world? When people recognize a certain society as being at the forefront in a type of knowledge, in science and technology and industry, isn't that where everyone is looking at in the world? Where everyone is sending their children to go and learn and attend universities and get work because they are at the forefront of knowledge in those areas? The Imam is talking about this. He's giving us the blueprint 14 centuries ago. And he's saying not only everyone is looking at this, their deeds are observed, their traces are sought. People want to walk in their footsteps. People want to mimic them and imitate them and do as they do so that perhaps they may become like them. And we talked at length about this in the series on modernity and the intellectual. And we said we have many people in today's world considered great thinkers, Islamic thinkers, who say the way Islamic communities are going to prosper and evolve and develop is by imitating and mimicking the West. We do as they did. How were they able to reach industrial revolutions, and how were they able to reach financial and technological and other revolutions? We just have to walk in their footsteps. This is normal. The Imam is talking about this. He's giving us the map, the blueprint. Their traces are sought. تُرْمَقُ أَعْمَالُهُم تُقْتَبَسُ آثَارُهُم. And then the Imam comes back and he adds the religious dimension. وَتَرْغَبُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ فِي خِلَّتِهِمْ. And the angels long for their companionship. Oh no, this is another type of knowledge. That the angels want to be the ones in your company and in your presence. And then the Imam continues with a list of the benefits of this knowledge. For knowledge is the life of the hearts, the light of the eyes against blindness, the strength of bodies against weakness. All of this can be interpreted entirely religiously, entirely spiritually, or not. Knowledge is a light. Knowledge allows you to see. If I have enough financial knowledge, I see clearly all the financial transactions happening. And I become a lot more difficult to trick financially. I'm not blind. I'm not naive. I'm not innocent. I'm not ignorant. And this applies to every type of knowledge. It becomes a light against blindness. The Imam says, and the strength of bodies against weakness. There's a spiritual dimension to this, by the way. But the clear physical aspect of it, learn medicine. Knowledge. You understand how your body works so that you stay strong and don't become weak. And then you add a psychological dimension to this. Your knowledge of things that are spiritual gives you strength in your body. And you are able to overcome a lot because of your faith, because of your values, because of your perseverance and your patience. You can take on a lot more. This is a physical strength. Your friend who does not have this will say, I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I'm lazy, I'm depressed. The person who has these beliefs will have the discipline to overcome all of this. Who cares about being tired? The person who doesn't eat says, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I can't do anything. When you fast in the holy month of Ramadan, you don't say that. Are you tired? Yes, you're tired. But you also have the discipline to keep going. This is motivated by faith. You have faith. Nothing else. Any other time of the year, that faith is not there. You haven't eaten for 4 or 5 hours, you say, I'm hungry. I'm non-functional. I cannot keep studying. I can't keep working. I have to eat. In the holy month of Ramadan, you look at the time and you can see that you're not eating for another 6 hours. Do you shut down? You can't shut down. You're at work, you're at school. What keeps you going? Faith. Isn't this a form of strength of your body against weakness? This is, by the way, what Imam Ali alayhi salam, when they told him, there's a lot to unpack here. When they told him, how did you remove the door of Khaybar, the gate of Khaybar? They came afterwards and they tried to move it. In the riwayat, you have, in one of the riwayat, it says over 20 men came together to carry it and they couldn't. And Imam Ali alayhi salam removed it with one arm because he lost his shield and the arrows and the spears were coming his way from all sides. So to defend himself, he grabbed the door and he ripped it off its hinges and he used it as a shield. That's the story of the door of Khaybar, the gate of this tower that is called Khaybar, that was attached with chains that men would come and spin so that the door lifts or closes. So when they came and they tried to lift it, they couldn't. Over 20 men. So they came to Imam Ali alayhi salam and they told him, come on, tell us. How did you do this? And Imam Ali alayhi salam, his answer, he told them, I did not lift it with a physical strength. I lifted it with my faith, with a force or a power of faith. Physically speaking, perhaps it would be possible for a human being to lift that much weight. Normally, human beings can't. But we all know that human beings can do incredible things beyond what they normally do if you have a bit of a dose of something else. The stories of mothers coming to the rescue of their children, there are too many, innumerable, countless stories. When they say that a small woman is able to lift a car, how? There is something that comes beyond just the physical. The Imam is talking about a religious component, a psychological component, a physical component. All of these are intertwined. God grants the bearer of knowledge the rank of his beloved ones. So you become a beloved to God because you carry knowledge. One grants him the company of the righteous in this world and the next. By knowledge, God is obeyed and worshipped. We're back to fiqh. By knowledge, God is known and declared to be one. Aqa'id, beliefs. By it, kinship ties are maintained. Family ties are maintained. The lawful and unlawful are discerned. Knowledge is the leader of the intellect, and intellect is a gift God grants to the blessed and withholds it from the wretched. So that's the first hadith. I'll quickly go over the second hadith. Time is moving too quickly. In the second hadith, the mark of the intelligent person is that he is forbearing toward one who ignores him. He pardons the one who wrongs him. He humbles himself before those below him. He races with those above him seeking virtue. Each one of these deserves a whole commentary. When he wishes to speak, he reflects. If it is good, he speaks and thereby gains. And if it is evil, he remains silent and is thereby safe. When a trial presents itself, he seeks refuge in God, restraining both his hand and his tongue. When he sees an opportunity for merit, he seizes it. Humility never leaves him, nor does greed appear from him. These are the 10 qualities by which the intelligent person is known. As for the ignorant, he wrongs those with whom he associates. He transgresses against those below him. He arrogates himself over those above him. He speaks without reflection. If he speaks, he sins. If he remains silent, he is heedless. When a trial arises, he rushes towards it, and it destroys him. When he sees a virtue, he turns away and lags behind it. He does not fear his past sins, nor does he restrain himself from future ones. I have to say something here. I'm holding back. When he says he does not fear his past sins, I've talked about this in the past, but this is important. There is a wrong trend that has appeared in some of our communities, not here, but in many communities, English-speaking communities, where people are very open with their past sins. Our narrations say, you do not share your past sins. You self-reflect, you repent, you make sure it never happens again. Don't openly and almost proudly share your past sins and then say, this was wrongdoing. Don't share it in the first place. By sharing it by itself is encouragement enough to others that this is something that so-and-so has done too. Especially if you are a leader, if you are a person of position, you're a people of influence. We all have shortcomings. Unless there is a gigantic benefit from sharing past sins, the rule is you do not share past sins. This desensitizes the community. If I openly say I've been listening to music, alhamdulillah, I stopped listening to music now. Does that encourage you to listen to music or not to listen to music? To listen to music. He did it. He's doing okay now. He didn't die. It's not the end of the world. I might as well do it too, and I'll also repent and stop later. We do not share sins unless there is a good reason to share. Be ashamed of the sin. Be afraid of the sin. Remove the sin and never go back to it. And consider it something serious, something that needs to be removed entirely. And keep that holiness and that sacredness, that this was something important, that's something that should never go back to. It has to stay in that type of context and not suddenly slip into, this is something trivial and we openly talk about it. Because we live in a culture perhaps where the worst of actions are trivialized and made jokes about and presented as though, any decadence becomes something trivial. This is not acceptable. In any case, he does not fear his past sins, nor does he restrain himself from future ones. He neglects goodness and is slow to pursue it. This is the ignorant person. He knows that this is something good, but he doesn't rush behind it. He neglects it. He is slow to pursue it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the munafiqeen when they stand to prayer. وَإِذَا قَامُوا إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ قَامُوا كُسَالَى. Right? They're lazy. You have to drag them to come perform the prayer. Uncaring for what he has missed or lost of it. These are 10 traits of the ignorant person who has been deprived of intellect. We don't have time to go through all of these. In short, and I think the gist inshallah is clear, not all of these are religious traits. In fact, most of these are not religious traits. The good ones and the bad ones. They're more psychological traits. They're traits of character. You would say this is someone who is greedy, someone who isn't. Of course, there's a religious dimension. But the Imam is not talking about specifically religious traits. He's talking about personality traits. And then there's a link with the intellect and with knowledge. And this is to show that no matter where you look, and this is to give an example more from psychology, the previous hadith it touched on all sorts of things, including medicine, right? That you want to be able to use knowledge as a weapon against the enemies. This is not religious knowledge, though it may be. To know that shaitan is an enemy, you have to have that type of knowledge. So here the Imam is giving us very clear examples that no matter where you look, even though it is supposed to be knowledge, whether it is worldly or not, you're going to see that it's intertwined one way or another with religious knowledge. This is what we're trying to establish here. And as we said later in the series, we're going to see that there are much more specific examples we're going to address of things that our religion says go and learn them, and they may not sound like they are types of religious knowledge. They are worldly knowledge. But we will see that they have a religious aspect to them. Next point. The next point is, and I talked a little bit about this, when we are talking about religious knowledge, we have to look at it as two types. The first, I'm going to start with the second one that I'm not talking about today, but just so that we distinguish it from the first. The second type of religious knowledge is here called the specific and the disciplinary. This is the one that we should be thinking about, all of us. What is religious knowledge? It is fiqh and akhlaq and aqaid and tafsir and seerah and sunnah and so on and so forth. Right? It is Islamic law, it's Quranic sciences, it's so on and so forth. Beliefs and the like. Very clear disciplines. And we will get to those. I think next time. We'll start next time, inshallah, with that too. But what about one? One is to have religious knowledge that gives you your worldview. That is the foundation for how you live your life, how you experience reality. Every thought and every experience you have is going through a filter. It may be completely unconscious for you, but there's a filter through which everything you experience is going through. This filter for us should be religion. Who you are, first and foremost, is a religious person, is a believer in God, who may also be an athlete or a historian or an artist or a computer scientist or anything else, but a believer in God. That gives a completely different meaning to how you live your life and how you experience reality than someone who does not have that layer. And this is what we mean by religion being, first, before I start talking about specific types of religious knowledge, like fiqh and akhlaq, there is foundational knowledge. You can learn this specifically if you have someone who knows how to present this specifically, or it comes to you from the spirit of your religion. You understand enough about your religion that everything you experience, you're experiencing it through that religious lens. Everything. Your sleep, your eating, your playing, your working, your studying, all of it is experienced through what we call your worldview. It's a paradigm. It's your identity. The framework through which you understand everything. This idea that human beings only understand reality through a foundational framework and everything goes through it, Every philosopher who has thought about this has presented this idea. In philosophy, they refer to this as a part of, it's the foundation of your epistemology, your theory of knowledge, but it goes way beyond. It's not just how you understand, it's how you experience reality. And understanding reality is one part of it. So a few examples. There's a philosopher by the name of Immanuel Kant, the first one. Huge philosopher, incredibly influential in the West. He talked about this idea of the transcendental knowledge and the empirical sciences. He says that it is impossible for human beings to understand things as they truly are. Human beings are like stuck in their own reality, in their own mind. Everything they experience through a mind given to them. What is outside of that mind, he says, human beings will never know. Every thought you have, every experience you have is going through a lens, which is your mind. Including yourself, your understanding of yourself. In philosophy, they used to refer to these as categories. Aristotle spoke about the categories. Kant spoke about the categories. Human beings are forced to understand reality, for instance, one of the categories, through time. A human being cannot imagine what it means to experience anything without the dimension of time. It's always there. It's part of your framework. It's part of your worldview. It's part of your paradigm, your identity. He spoke about this, and he said, and then, so once we understand this framework, this is the foundation, everything is experienced through it, now we can talk about the things within that are actually being experienced, but we have to have all agreed that there's a framework through which all of this went through. Edmund Husserl. Science detached from worldview shaping disciplines becomes directionless and without meaning. Now he's talking about natural sciences. When you study biology, you study astronomy, you study physics, he says if you do not have a discipline that is worldview shaping. When you study physics, it has to go through another discipline first, because physics is about nature. Biology is about nature. He says you have to have another discipline that filters the content coming to you from physics. What type of discipline? A discipline that shapes your worldview. By the way, all of them are talking about philosophy. Deep philosophy, metaphysics, the nature of reality, the nature of knowledge. But he says you cannot just jump into these topics without having an understanding that they're going through a filter. Most people don't realize that it's going through that filter. If you don't have that filter, that piece of knowledge becomes either meaningless or extremely dangerous. And that's what these philosophers were talking about. They were hinting at the fact that if you do not have a framework, then nothing has true meaning. And everything may be abused. Nothing has value. There is no more right and wrong because it doesn't fit into a bigger picture where this can have an effect. This helps or harms. None of that exists. It's just physics for physics, biology for biology, history for history. So it becomes either completely useless or it becomes something dangerous. Sellers, he was talking about the manifest and the scientific. The manifest image, the scientific image. He says the manifest image is the philosophical, ethical framework that shapes how we interpret meaning. Everything that you understand is understood through a layer. Scientific image is specialized from a field. You have a name for each one of the sciences. It is by itself. But it has gone through something before it to give it meaning, to give it understanding. John Dewey says, philosophy is the general theory of experience. You understand all of experience, one, and you are able to criticize everything happening in your experience through it. So it's always a step before, a step back. It's a foundation. McIntyre and Charles Taylor, so that we move a little bit faster. The same idea. Very well-known philosophers now. Both of them are still alive, by the way. Considered some of the biggest philosophers in the world today. Same idea. The narrative and the unity of knowledge and the background frameworks. All of them are talking about the same idea. That if you have a framework, that framework is allowing you to understand everything you are experiencing, you're thinking about, you're studying, and so on and so forth. Why did I go through all of these? To explain that when we are saying religion gives you the framework, religion gives you the paradigm, religion gives you the foundation to understand reality, we are not exaggerating. They want to say it is philosophy. We believe our religion has given us all of this. And the first step is, and we've talked about this in classes of beliefs, the first step is, am I a theist or not? Is my understanding and interpretation and foundation one that is theistic with a God in the center or not? We believe that all of this comes from religion. And the reason I mentioned all of this is to say, when we say the first type of knowledge we want and our religion says to acquire is religion, this is what we mean. Before I talk about akhlaq and aqa'id and fiqh, I have to talk about the foundational knowledge. What is my foundation? What is the framework through which I experience and understand reality? What gives meaning to my life? What gives values to everything that happens? We believe, for us believers, it is religion. Even a non-believer looking at a believer will say, the religion will give them that. The poor non-believers have a problem. They have to go create that. Find that for themselves. Construct it one way or another. We have a coherent, cohesive whole that is provided to us by religion. I'm going to stop here because this is going to open a new topic and it's getting too late. We will not have enough time to talk about it. Inshallah, the next time we meet, we talk about this. These are 4 little words that have caused a lot of scholars in Islam to think about and to write about and to study. So I'll just mention them now, and inshallah, the next time we meet, we start here. We have been talking about the idea that there is a lot of knowledge and therefore we must prioritize it. We must find what is most important, select it, choose it, and prioritize it over that which is important, but not the most important. We have to be able to say this is necessary and this is good. Good is good, but necessary is much more important. Correct? So we have 4 initiatives, let's call them, projects, let's call them, where scholars have come and started to study everything Islam has to say. The first one has been called fiqh al-muwazanat. The scholars here say this is a new fiqh we are presenting to the world, or a specific way of looking at all of fiqh, which is what? Which is a fiqh of balancing. Understanding how to balance things that seem to be competing in priority, competing in value. How do I balance these? That's a whole school of thought. That's 1. 2, al-maqasidiyya or fiqh al-maqasid. Some scholars have said when we look at Islamic teachings, we are able to identify a few core principles that are the most fundamental in our religion. And everything else in religion has to protect these, derive out of these, never contradict these. Otherwise, we are going against the maqasid, the higher purposes of the Sharia, the higher purposes of religion. So what are these? Are they 3 or 5 or 7 or 50? We have to study religion and say. Example, all of them will say the protection and sanctity of life is one of the maqasid of the Sharia. So if you come up with something that contradicts one of the maqasid, one of the higher purposes, then you have to take a pause and say, is this still something we can do if it is going against the higher purposes or not? Do you have an explicit permission that allows you to do that or not? This is entirely based on prioritization and selecting that which is untouchable in its priority versus those other things that may be important and good, but not at the level of the maqasid. Another huge initiative, fiqh al-awlawiyat. A fiqh based on your ability to say there are things that come before other things. So now we're not specifically talking about the maqasid, the highest purposes of religion, things that are important. What comes first? How do I choose what comes first? And if something is not first, do I completely neglect it or do I have to do a bit of it? And how much? This is a whole fiqh called fiqh al-awlawiyat. And then finally, fiqh al-maslaha. The fiqh of benefits. Studying benefits. What is the benefit in doing or not doing something? What if 2 things produce a benefit, but one of them produces a much greater benefit than another? Is it obligatory to go to that which produces a bigger benefit, or is it recommended? Do I have a choice or not? What type of benefit matters? As an example, and I'll stop here for sure. The Holy Quran says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. And they ask you about wine and gambling. Say, O Prophet, say, there is great sinning in them, great decadence in these, great harm in these. فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ. And there are some benefits. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. People do benefit from these. This is the practicality of Islam, the accuracy of Islam. Islam is not saying there is absolutely nothing good that can ever come out of wine and gambling. It didn't say that. Yeah, sure. The verse is saying, is there something good that can come out of them? Sure, there is some good. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. But the harm they cause is much greater than their benefits. And so Islam said they are entirely forbidden. It's not they are okay to do so long as you have not reached the harm or that the benefit. No, it openly said there is good, but the good is not enough. It stays entirely forbidden. The harm they cause is too much. Can we take that type of logic and apply it elsewhere? This is what fiqh al-maslaha is trying to study. This is what fiqh al-awlawiyat is trying to study. So a little bit more on that, just so that we know what these terms are, understand some of the initiatives, link things that seem to be very, very down-to-earth, trivial, simple that we're talking about, to what the greatest minds in fiqh around the world are fighting about and trying to reach conclusions about. And you see that the theme and the topic is the same. It's an ability to prioritize that which is more of a priority, to identify that which is the more important and to put criteria in place for all of that. Let's stop here. We're out of time. Inshallah, the next time that we meet, we continue with this point and then we start building on the specific types of religious knowledge that we are instructed to start studying in our religion. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Maybe we have time for 2 to 3 minutes of questions or comments if there are any. Yeah? تفضل.
I should know better by now to not discount you too early, but this lecture kind of wraps up last lectures amazingly, and in terms of like the punchline that came with it. With the last lecture, I was kind of a little bit not disappointed, but I was kind of like, is there more like in terms of what we're talking about religious knowledge outside of like we're talking about it being strictly fiqh or like and so on and so forth, with the greater language added to it. But also, is that separate from looking at all knowledge in general and adding the correct intention behind it and so on and making that Islamic knowledge? Is that really good fit? But from what I understand that from today, it's kind of like a layering thing we have where it's like the foundation of Islamic knowledge, what we call that, whether it's is it by itself, is what we're doing right now, this lecture or reading about hadith, that also, where does that fall into, or is that also part of fiqh, religious knowledge? That becomes your lens that focuses all the light beams to make it like a laser beam of anything that you touch or anything that you are approaching, makes it into religious knowledge at that point. Is that the correct way of looking at it, from what I understand?
Yes. So, complex question for those who did not hear it. So we haven't started to talk about religious knowledge. So don't dismiss me too quickly, because we haven't started. Everything that we have said until now is to introduce. Once we are done with this, then we can start talking about religious knowledge. And as usual in this series, everything is cumulative. So we're always adding a little bit more to what we said, but everything we said earlier is still applying. So, of course, at the end, we are headed towards an understanding of Islamic knowledge that will encompass everything. But it will encompass everything in a proper way. So that when you say, if someone were to just, without all of this foundation, someone just says biology is part of Islamic knowledge, no, it's not. But we are putting the framing in place so that you can create the nuances and the framework to say, it may be, if done in the right way, it will have its place in your overall knowledge of everything, and it will be called Islamic. And this opens, by the way, another topic that we don't want to talk about, because it's not the right time and it will take a huge amount of time to talk about, but there is a question, a philosophical question in fiqh or in sharia or in Islamic thinking or law, if you want to be strict about it. What has religion talked about, or what does Islam or religion talk about? Does it talk about everything? Like, this is a genuine question that scholars disagree on. Does religion talk about everything? Or does religion limit itself to that which is relevant to your spiritual salvation and what you need to make it to heaven? And everything else becomes irrelevant. It's up to you. Go figure it out. Does religion talk about how you're going to organize your traffic lights in the street? Most people will say no. Some people will say yes, not explicitly, but it will give you the general principles. The general principles apply to everything, including how you brush your teeth or how you structure your traffic lights. This is part of Islam doesn't need to come and list everything. It can give you the principles and explain to you what applies where. You go apply. And we have scholars that fall in both camps. Those who say see religion as something more restricted, the sphere of religion is more restricted, and the rest is up to human experience. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you, this is your space to work in. Mantiqatul faragh. Okay? Or those who say, no, everything has been talked about, presented, explained, organized, frameworked in religion. You just need to know how to take it. We are not going to make a position here. This is not a lesson for ijtihad, for us to reach that conclusion. But I assure you that whoever mujtahid you're following has to have an answer to these questions. Because you cannot build your fiqh without this foundation. Very quickly, you said this is all part of fiqh. It is true that it is ultimately part of fiqh, but this is not studied in fiqh per se. It is studied in the related field of fiqh, which is usul al-fiqh, or falsafatul fiqh, as some of them are now starting to refer to it. Okay, usul al-fiqh is the study of everything that is common to everything in fiqh, related to fiqh, but is not fiqh per se. So they take all of these out and they put them in a related discipline. They call them usul al-fiqh, the principles of fiqh, or the foundations. And what we're talking about, you are seeing inshallah clearly, is not limited to fiqh. It's not limited to halal and haram, right? We are thinking about how to live our lives. And that's why I think it's limiting to call it fiqh, because usually fiqh is understood as being something very restricted to haram, halal. You know, how you act, how you perform the act, how we're going a lot deeper in this thinking. So it includes ma'arif or haqa'iq or aqa'id, or however you want to call your entire understanding of reality. Yeah. Another very short question like this one. Okay, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.